What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're returning to my series where I look at the best fighters in the world. I give you 5 things that make them so exceptional with tips to improve at the gym, so you're not only learning what they're good at, but you also learn how to get better yourself. It's been a while since I've returned to this series. I've been covering so many other things that were interesting me, but we've done Buakaw, Petr, Canelo, Conor McGregor in this series, more and more and more. The list just keeps on growing, and today we're focusing on Petr Yan. The interim bantamweight UFC champion. Should probably just be the actual champion, not interim, but that's just a different discussion. So today we're going to focus on Petr, and we are going to take a look at what makes him so spectacular and why he's being able to become a UFC champion. So I decided to cover Petr Yan because I had so many requests coming in. People were going, I want to know what makes this guy so good, what makes him so exceptional. And to be honest with you, I had only seen his fight against Jose Aldo. Obviously because Aldo is a fantastic striker, somebody that I really like to watch, so I made a point of getting out and viewing that fight. But aside from that, I hadn't seen anything on Yan. But now that I've taken a look at him, I have a better understanding of who he is, and I can share some things with you guys. Now, the first thing I want to really point out about this guy is he's not flashy. He's not full of flair for the most part. He sticks to basics, and it's going to be a pleasure covering somebody who just sticks to basics, who's not super fancy, who's not super difficult to break down. Everything he does is basically textbook beginner stuff, aside from a few things, of course. But overall, he just executes it very well. So let's dive into our first point. And we are talking about how Petr gets his head off the center line so often when he throws. It's very rare to see him come straight in and throw a punch with his head right here, especially when he's executing power punches. Now, why is this so important? Why is this so valuable? Well, first off, if you walk straight in and you just throw a punch, you're running the risk that if the guy throws back, you're going to eat the shot. And because your momentum is moving in, you're the one who's actively pushing forward. If the guy throws a defensive shot, it's going to hurt that much more. So what he does every time is he just drops his head to the side where the hand is stapled to his cheek. And when he does that, anybody who throws a counter punch, probably like 99 out of 100 times when I'm watching him, they end up missing. And this is just a spectacular way to make sure that when you go on the offense, you're not easy to counter. Now, how do we go about drilling this? Well, it's not overly difficult. What you need to do is start off and practice a move forward, back, forward, back. Now I throw my jab, back, forward, back. Now my head needs to come off that center line as I move forward. Drop, drop, drop. I'm going to give you guys a couple of key points here on these to make sure you're not doing it incorrectly. Number 1, as we drop our head, one of the very first things that we need to recognize is my head drops, puts me in a terrible position for a counter round kick. So if I'm just going like this with this hand down, kaboom, and you're done. I've seen this happen many times before. Staple the hand to your head so you're protected. Mistake number 2, if you see me from a side profile, is a lot of times people just drop sideways. But you can see how this minimizes my distance. I lean sideways to try and escape, counter shots, but now I've missed out on all that extra extension. So you want your head not to go sideways, but also not to go straight forward. You want it to go on a 45 degree angle, and you're going to make sure that you just get that head off that center line. It makes it so much easier to not run the risk of the counter shot. If you want to advance the drilling on this, if I was holding for you guys, I would go simply jab my chest. You step forward, you jab my chest. You get your head off the center line. I let you touch me, with the jab, and then I start throwing my own jab, right where your head was. I reach in, I touch the guy in the chest, and his hand slips by my head. And I just repeat that over and over. Touch my chest, other way, touch my chest, and you just ingrain in your head, whenever you go on the offense, on the first shot, you get your head off that center line. Petr does this so well, and it's something that everybody should be doing at least have it in your arsenal. You don't need to execute it every time like Petr does, but you definitely want to make sure that you have it in the vault. It's up here so you can execute it when needed. And for shorter fighters, it's very important to get this down really well. Point number 2 that I want to talk about is Yan's ability to stance switch when he punches. And I noticed time and time again, he was landing shots. It looked like he might have been out of range. But what he does is he throws and he steps, and that gives him that little bit of extra range which he can make up. And it makes very, very difficult for his opponent to understand range. If you think, okay, the guy's right here, he can touch me. They take a little step back. They're going, okay, now he can't touch me without moving forward. But then he steps, boom, and he throws that shot. This is something that we've seen Floyd Mayweather do very often. Floyd will be in his stance, he'll step in, land the big cross, and then roll under. Spectacular way to surprise your opponent with a power shot from such a far distance away. Now, very often, Yan will hide it behind either a hook or one of his jabs. He has a very interesting guard. Well, not interesting, but a very nice guard where he has one hand up and one hand usually out. This hand's very far away, so he can just pepper that out. He throws this as the blinder and then boom, steps through. Or throws with the jab, boom, steps through. Very effective, very impressive in my mind. Not something that's super, super advanced, but something that you don't see a lot of people pull off, and maybe more people should be training in the gym. If you guys want to start trying to execute this, what you simply need is a target that's out of range. I go, okay, I'm right here. I can touch my target, okay? Take a step back. Now from here, I can't touch. Instead of doing something silly with your body like, leaning in, let this foot simply step through. It just steps through, and at the same time you throw your punch, and then you probably want to get your head off that center line as well. Forward, boom, if you need to. I love this technique by him, and like I said, it surprises many of his opponents. It seems to be working on pretty much everybody. So it's not just that he's lucky with it. Occasionally, he makes this really work. And guys, before we move on to the next point, if you wouldn't mind, please give the video a like, throw some love my way. I really appreciate it. Next up, I want to talk about Yan's defense. He very rarely gets caught in these positions where his chin is up and he gets tagged really hard. Or, you know, he's moving his head around a whole bunch, doing all fancy slipping or trying to catch shots, and he takes a shot for it. The reason that doesn't happen is very often his guard, you see his one hand, it's stapled to his head. The other hand is finding the point where, you know, he sees an opening so he can blast that cross in, which we already talked about. And then if he needs to and he goes, uh-oh, the guy's closed the gap, boom, right away. Nice tight guard, something you would learn on the very first month of training. Just execute from here. So many people, especially in MMA, are worried about all the fancy head movement and, you know, catch, catch, catch. The thing about that, even though it is very effective, is in my opinion, at some point, it's going to lead to a mistake and probably to a knockout. But as far as I understand, Yan hasn't suffered any knockouts and he's keeping his brain fairly intact by the look of it. Defensively, he doesn't take a whole massive amount of shots where his head's just snapping. And I base that all off beginner defense. Good foundation. Hands tight. One hand out if he needs to, but this other hand locked here. Shoulders nice and high. And he's not leaving any openings. He's not taking any risks. He's being smart defensively. If you want to get as good as Yan at defense, I've talked about this time and time again. You'll hear me talk about it even more on the channel. Simply set yourself up somewhere where you have nowhere to run. Could be a wall behind you, could just be, okay, I'm gonna plant my feet, have a partner come in front, have them nice and light, just throwing you, just at that pace. Boom, 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 boom. And you just stand there and you just work small maneuvers of the hands, blocking, not reaching far, but also not just standing like a statue, something in between, where you're just picking off shots and basically trying to get your hand in between the punch and your head. It's just creating a cushion. Once you can accomplish that and your eyesight becomes locked on, you're so much safer defensively. Next, I want to talk about Petr Yan's cross. He lands it so often against so many opponents, and I want to look at what he's doing in particular to allow him to be successful. And I've kind of, put this point at the end because everything else we already talked about kind of feeds in to what makes this cross so great. So first off, we talked about his defense, how he keeps one hand fairly far out. I find that this for him is probably a blinder, it's a distractor, and it's something that helps him set up that big cross. We also talked about him getting his head off the center line. Doesn't matter what stance he's in, when he throws his cross, his head moves off that center line. It's another reason that he's successful, because he has the confidence of knowing he's not most likely going to get countered when he throws. So he's able to throw that with a lot of confidence, knowing he's not going to get hurt, but he can definitely inflict pain. And of course, we already talked about the footwork, his ability to step in if needed in close distance, because sometimes he lands it just boom, it's just there, boom, and it's just sharp and crisp. Now, another reason I think that he's able to land this cross so nicely is he sticks with the basics. He's not doing anything crazy fancy. He's just right from here, straight out, straight back in. Good foundation, good building block right from the beginning. Not trying to pull off anything ridiculous. Now his overhand is also fairly nice. It's a nice, crisp, sharp overhand, not too rounded. And I think people sometimes, after getting clipped with one of those, start worrying about that. And it's a little difficult for them to tell if the cross or the overhand's coming. And it's that small angle switch from here or to here, which makes it difficult for them to assess in the moment. Oh shoot, should I reach or should I block down the middle? But if you used something like Petr Yan's defense, which we already talked about, which is just very crisp, you just block everything, then you'd probably be able to block his shots. But because people don't have the same defense as him, he's able to find a hole with that cross offense. Guys want to get that kind of cross, you need to be able to just maneuver around like he does, where you can make adjustments. The guys out of range, step through. The guys standing within range, okay, get that hand out there, blind them a little bit, throw the fakes, and then boom, right down the middle. Keeping elbow tight, letting the hips engage. And of course, as we already talked about, head off the center line. We don't really need to kill this one to death. The cross fits into everything else we already talked about, but it's so successful against all his opponents that I wanted to bring it up and I wanted to mention to it. Basics and foundation of the cross will allow you to land. Now the past 4 points have been all basics, nothing super fancy, but something else I really like about him, because he's worked everything that I would tell a beginner student, an intermediate student, and an advanced student. The beginner stuff is the most important. That's gonna build a good foundation. That's the building block of everything. But when people get more advanced, I say, keep sticking with those beginner things, they're the most important, but sprinkle in some fanciness, sprinkle in some surprises, and he does that so well. One of the clips that I saw, which was just spectacular, was him coming around with a spinning back fist into a hook. You don't see that very often. He busts out spinning elbows very often, spinning hook kicks. He's throwing in all these surprise techniques, which then throw people off. They forget, oh shoot, this guy's really good at basics. They start worrying about fancy, the next fancy follow-up, and then he just goes back to just those simple things, cross, proper defense, working the head off the center line on the punches, step through if he needs to, cover that gap, and then at some point all of a sudden he'll go back to a spinning technique. They don't come too often, but when they do come, they're extremely dangerous because people forget about them, and then they worry about them, and then they forget about them, and then they worry about them, and it's like he always knows what's going on in their head, when to throw it at the right time. That's just my opinion, guys. Instead of, I'm kind of guilty of it sometimes, I just throw spinning techniques because I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe this round needs a little bit more flair. I just want to throw something. I don't necessarily wait for the best time. I just huck it. You want to be able to really time it out and find the opportune moments to land. So you can always throw those spinning techniques, the back fist, the hook kicks, the spinning side kicks, to whatever you want, tornado kicks if necessary, but you want to make sure that you're not just throwing them at any time. Try and throw them when somebody's worried about the awesome basics you've been laying on them. You throw, and then all of a sudden, boom! And then don't throw a spinning technique again because now they're thinking about it. Go back to basics. And then when you're ready, you can jump up, throw that spinning side kick, boom! And you just surprise them. Just something that I think adds a new element to his fight style. He's so solid in the foundation, the basics, but then he can bust out those advanced techniques, which he actually looks like he could be successful with, whereas some people are not successful with their spinning techniques. So guys, this is everything that I thought made this amazing UFC fighter so phenomenal. Like I said, take a moment and recognize that everything I pretty much talked about was built from the beginner stage, just really executing very nicely the fundamentals. It's a good reminder for us that that's where we want to always go back to. We want to keep working on it over and over. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot to me if you give it a like, help get it out there. If you haven't already, join the channel and get subscribed. As always, guys, train hard. I'll see you back here soon for another video.